So today I'm going to discuss gun control and why more gun control, unfortunately, will not mitigate or stop spree shootings and especially school shootings. Um, so the response to spree shootings, school shootings, is always more gun control by left-wing people. And unfortunately, there's a lot of flaws with this kind of response. Um, Now, for one thing, I believe that this fixation on spree shootings is actually irrational. Spree shootings account for a very, very small percentage of all violent crime in America, but it gets a disproportionate amount of attention in the media. Okay, so this could be its own video, but it's worth saying that there are more practical solutions to reduce violent crime in America that have far fewer political obstacles, and I'm going to get into that in a second, um, than gun control. And it would have a much more profound effect at mitigating violent crime. Unfortunately, those measures to reduce violent crime across the board likely will not have any meaningful impact on mitigating or preventing spree shootings because the reasons for why people commit spree shootings are very, very different than the reasons for why people commit other forms of violent crime. So that needs to be said that spree shootings are a rarity, okay? And the question as to why people commit mass murder when they have nothing to gain from it is something that you should keep simmering in your mind. Okay, I'll address it, but I should address it in another video because if I make it in this video, the video is going to be way too long. Okay, but it's worth discussing and I will address it. But it's something that you should think about. Okay, what would compel a man to essentially give up his entire life, the value of life itself, just to kill others when he reaps nothing as a reward from doing so? And you also have to keep in mind that these people make zero effort to conceal their crimes. That's a very, very important thing. They receive no reward for killing people, and they make no effort to conceal their crimes because they don't care if they get caught. And they usually die with their victims. Um, However, this is not how most violent crime manifests. Okay? Most violent crime manifests as something that actually does reap a reward, and the people who perpetrate most violent crime, if you look at the vast majority of violent crime, those things are done furtively, meaning that they don't want to get caught. So these are things that you should think about um, while we talk about why gun control really won't help in mitigating the rare instances where spree shootings actually do occur. So the reason why it won't help is because America has a Second Amendment. So here on the screen, I have the article, Wikipedia article about assault weapons. So unfortunately, the reason why the left doesn't do a really good job in kind of addressing this problem is because they don't have a very good understanding of guns, which kind of makes sense because left-wing people have other interests. They are passionate and knowledgeable about many things, but guns typically aren't one of them. Now, I want to make it clear, right-wing people aren't exactly experts on guns usually either. There is a difference between a gun nerd um, and people who subscribe to gun culture. And gun culture is very much part of white identity politics. Okay. But just because someone subscribes to gun culture does not mean they know anything about guns. If you look at the Rittenhouse trial, you remember Kyle Rittenhouse, who took an AR-15 to Kenosha, and he ended up killing two people and wounding at least one other guy. Um, if you watch the trial, and he took the stand in his own defense, and he was questioned by the prosecutor. And in his responses, he actually revealed that he knew very little about the AR-15 that he was carrying. He's just kind of an idiot, a buffoon, dullard. Um, and this spoke that most of these white identity politics people who subscribe to white nationalism, white supremacy, the MAGA types, they don't know anything about guns. Okay. So I just wanted to make that kind of clear that even though a lot of left wing people don't really know much about guns, a lot of right wing people don't know much about guns either. Um, so I said before that the reason why more gun control won't help is because we have a Second Amendment. So here we have the article about assault weapon. Now there was a assault weapons ban in America, and it was in 1994, and it expired sometime in the 2000s. I can't remember exactly when. I could read this article, but it doesn't really matter. Um, what an assault weapon is not actually a military term. It is at best a political term, but it's mostly just a buzzword. There is no definition for what an assault weapon is. And in trying to ban assault weapons when it's not a well-defined thing, ends up with a pretty major problem where you can't actually ban the weapons that you originally intended to ban, at least not in a meaningful way. Now, I could go through the definition here. You can kind of read it here for yourself if you want to, but it's not really worth reading because um, it's arbitrary. Assault weapon bans define an assault weapon arbitrarily, and because of that, weapon manufacturers can very easily circumvent bans by kind of creating stupid stuff, to kind of circumvent the bans. So something like a bump stock, for example, is able to, in some ways, in a limited way, circumvent restrictions on fully automatic weapons, where if you hold down the trigger, the weapon fires automatically. So stuff like that. Um, Now, the idea is that they want to ban AR-15s, and this this goes back to their poor understanding of guns, in that it is true that an AR-15 does have a distinctive advantage over like handguns, but the advantage that it has is contextualized. They have an advantage over handguns when you're facing off against other men armed with guns. Let's say they're armed with pistols, in the outdoors where engagement ranges can be much greater. And they're also better if the men are equipped with body armor, right? Because the assault rifle has greater penetration. So I use the word assault rifle there. So there's a difference between assault weapon and assault rifle. Okay, assault rifle is a rifle like the AR-15 that uses an intermediate cartridge, 5.56. It's not the same thing as assault weapon. So if you ban assault weapons, that doesn't mean that you're actually banning assault rifles. So that's something to make very clear. Um, so I described where the AR-15 or a weapon similar to it actually has an advantage. When you're outdoors, you're at greater range, engagement ranges are greater, and you're facing off against other men who are armed with guns, and they're wearing body armor. Now, in spree shootings, none of these conditions are applicable. Okay, here you have a a man who is killing people who are unaware that he is going to kill them. Okay, he has the element of surprise. These people are unarmed. Okay, so the victims are unarmed. They have no body armor, and it's usually done indoors. And the engagement ranges are very, very close range. In this scenario, an AR-15 style rifle offers few advantages over just being armed with pistols. Um, so there was a crazy man. I shouldn't really use that word. Let me see. So we have the gun buyback program. Let's see. Let's type in something here. Here we go. There he is. Okay, so remember this guy, Sung Wee Cho. He killed 33 people, including himself. And at the time, he he murdered the most amount of people in a spree shooting. I think there's been more since then, but at the time, he killed the most. And he did this using just two pistols. One was a 9mm and the other was a 22 caliber. And he didn't use an assault rifle or assault weapon or an AR-15, whatever it is you want to call it. And the reason is because the reason why I was able to kill so many people was because of what I said. When you're killing people who are unarmed and it's close range indoors, an assault rifle doesn't offer much more advantage um, over just a pistol. You could say that the magazine can carry more ammunition, and typically that is true, but um, especially when you're killing people who are unarmed and can't shoot back, it doesn't really make that much of a difference. Um, and in most states, long rifles have limited capacity magazines anyway. Um, so you can't even have a full magazine of 30 rounds for assault rifles. Okay. So because of that, hitting the AR-15 won't have a meaningful impact in reducing casualties in the spree shooting. Now, it could perhaps uh, make cops less terrified of engaging a shooter because that would qualify as what I was describing before, where you have an AR-15. You actually do have an advantage against cops who are armed and are probably wearing body armor. But honestly, I think that has more to do with a problem with police than it does with anything else. Okay. If you have police who are too afraid to engage the shooter, then you have a problem with policing. Okay. At the moment, we have a Supreme Court ruling that says that police are under no constitutional obligation to put their lives in danger to protect the lives of citizens. So what that means is that cops don't have to protect you if they don't want to. They don't have to do their job, their one job. That's a big problem. If anything, we should make that a federal law that, yes, you know what? We have decided that cops do have a constitutional duty to protect the citizens. That's actually what we're paying them to do. And if they don't do it, there's going to be criminal consequences to that. Okay? That's what we need to do. So, yeah, I don't think cops being afraid of a spree shooter armed with an AR-15 is a good argument. That's that's reason for why we need police reform, massive police reform, and that's just one of the many things that need to be done to reform the cops. Now, some people might say that um, assault weapon bans have been successful in other countries, like for example Australia, and I believe now New Zealand has adopted adopted gun laws that are very similar to Australia. But this is where I go back to um, why why this kind of gun control won't work in America. Because in Australia and in New Zealand and any other country that has assault weapon bans, they don't have a Second Amendment. What this means is that in America, you don't actually need a good reason to own a gun, but in these countries, you do. Okay, so basically, long story short, in Australia, and you can read the article and read more about it yourself, but long story short, you can't own a gun in Australia unless you have a good reason. And what they consider to be a good reason is if you're a cop, if you're involved in security, if you're a farmer, or if you're involved in sport target shooting. Unless you fit into one of those four categories, you can't own a gun at all. Okay, so it's not just assault weapons ban. You can't get any gun unless you fit into one of those four criteria. And wanting it for self-defense is not a valid reason for owning a gun in Australia. And like I said, New Zealand has adopted a very similar set of gun control. And they can get away with it over there because they don't have a Second Amendment. In America, the Constitution does not consider the reason for why you want to own a gun. Now, it does say it's for a highly, whatever it is, for a militia, okay? But it doesn't necessarily say that it needs to be for that purpose. It just says that the rights of a citizen to own a firearm shall not be infringed upon. So because of that, you can own a firearm for any reason, although the framers of the Constitution likely intended it to mean that then they can then be called upon to form a militia in case the government ever becomes tyrannical. Now you could say that this is outdated, that this no longer is applicable and we should not be beholden to outdated amendments that no longer have any applicability in modern times. And I would agree with that. However, it's not that simple. You would have to withdraw, repeal the Second Amendment, which is not impossible, but it is impossible right now. Now, I do think going forward, the Second Amendment will be repealed. It just won't happen within our lifetime. Basically, you have to wait until the people who are in charge of all the politics in this country, the people who are in Congress right now, they have to be replaced by a newer generation. These old people need to die off. And these people, by the way, did not grow up during times of spree shootings. They did not grow up in times of where there were lockdown drills and things like that. You have to wait for these people to die off, and then they have to be replaced by younger people who did grow up in those times and have a personal reason for why they want to get rid of the Second Amendment. Okay? So that's the reason why it won't work. You have a Second Amendment that can be broadly interpreted to mean, you know, we can say, yeah, you do need gun control and there needs to be restrictions. But where those restrictions are is completely arbitrary. And that's why you have different gun laws in all different states. And federal assault weapon bans, unfortunately, will not do anything profound to mitigate spree shootings because you can kill so many people using handguns. And even with the restrictions on assault weapons, it's so easy for a gun manufacturer just to find a loophole and exploit it so that people can purchase something that would be identical in function to assault weapon anyway. Not that it would even make a difference because handguns can kill lots of people too. You're firing at close range at people who are unarmed and have no body armor. Um, so I know that this is not what people want to hear, but it's important for me to say these things because if you're convinced that more gun control won't, so even in an imaginary world where you get everything you want minus repealing the Second Amendment in terms of your gun control agenda, even if you get everything you want, the bad news is that it won't work at stopping spree shootings or even mitigating them. Now, some people would say, wait a minute, there's statistics that show that when the assault weapons ban expired, spree shootings went up. But it's not that simple. Okay? Correlation does not imply causation. You can't necessarily infer that the assault weapon ban uh, being expired is what caused a spike in spree shootings because there were spree shootings before the assault weapons ban. Columbine happened during the time when there was an assault weapons ban. Okay? No, there's another explanation for why that spike probably happened. My guess is that it's because people just bought more weapons that previously were banned while they could. You got to understand that gun sales go up after spree shootings. It sounds macabre, right? It sounds macabre, but that's just human pathology. Baby wants what baby can't have. If people fear that something's going to be taken away from them, they want it. Even if they don't need it, they want it, right? The baby was not playing with the toy this entire time. He was crying and shitting his pants, but as soon as you take away the toy, then all of a sudden the baby wants it. Nothing's changed. Once you become adults, the same mentality sticks. People will buy more guns when they fear that they will be taken away. And when the assault weapons ban expired, people bought lots and lots of guns, which flooded the market with lots of guns, which granted greater access to guns for more people. And yes, access to guns will lead to more spree shootings, but it's not the only factor. Okay. Again, this goes back into what I was talking about earlier in the video. You have to wonder why someone would give up and sacrifice their entire life to kill other people when there is no reward and it will almost certainly result in their own death. Okay, that's something you guys got to think about. I will address that. I just don't want to address it right now because I'm already been talking for over 23 minutes and I need to wrap things up. Um, so, to the people who are bristling about me saying that gun control is not going to help, let me ask you this. In spite of all of your protests and pushing and screaming for more gun control, what have you accomplished? Nothing. Okay, because not only will it not work, you are faced with unbelievable political obstacles. Okay, you have the MAGAs who are politically opposed to more gun control. So because of that, your efforts, your energy is better spent on other solutions that are more practical to achieve and will conducively result in a reduction in spree shootings. Now, what that might be is a very interesting discussion to have, and it's something that I will have in another video. But for now, I'll leave it at that. See you guys later.